One of the most iconic titles in video game history is The Legend of Zelda and all of the franchise's installments. From lovable characters to unforgettable quotes, this franchise has become an integral part of pop culture. Even so, there are some aspects of the franchise that even the biggest Zelda fan may not be aware of. It's dangerous to go alone. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to take the gamer with you on your arduous journey through Hyrule. Here are 10 surprising things you didn't know about the Legend of Zelda franchise. Dungeon Sim. Every gamer, regardless of whether or not they've played it, is aware that the Legend of Zelda franchise is brimming with dungeons. For most players, a dungeon crawl is the first thing that comes to mind when a Zelda title is mentioned. Who could blame them? Every dungeon in these games is creative, inventively designed, and oftentimes difficult. With so many dungeons to explore and survive, it's no wonder the word dungeon has become nearly synonymous with the franchise. Fans of the Legend of Zelda series may be surprised to hear the original game was completely different from the titles they know today. In fact, developers at Nintendo had a very different direction in mind for the now popular series. Much like the Mario Maker title, The Legend of Zelda was originally poised to be a dungeon builder where players could design their own dungeons. This is because Nintendo in the past wanted to show off the sheer power of the Famicom disk system and their rewritable floppy disks. Thankfully, Nintendo decided against the show of their new technology and instead decided to take the Legend of Zelda title in a different direction. Their decision paid off, and after all, fans of building games can always test their prowess in Mario Maker. Second quest. Gamers everywhere are aware of the bittersweet feeling which comes after beating a game. Clearly, everyone loves to complete whichever game it is they're playing, as it's kind of the point. At the same time, all of the joy garnered from getting achievements and looting the ever-loving rupees out of every chest in Hyrule has come to an end. Fortunately, Nintendo had fans covered when it came to The Legend of Zelda. Due to an oversight, the game included a second quest for Link. After a programmer found out that the entire Legend of Zelda game didn't take up nearly as much space on the cartridge as they anticipated, they decided to include a second quest. The second quest can be unlocked after completing the first quest, and the Link icon will be replaced by a version of Link holding his sword. Entering the name Zelda in the name input screen will start the second quest automatically. If a player's wondering whether this second quest is worth the time, it absolutely is. The locations on the map will change a bit, and the difficulty of the game is increased. Honestly, what fan of the franchise wouldn't want more Legend of Zelda playtime? Dangerous Journey. One of the most iconic scenes of the Legend of Zelda game is when Link enters the first cave. Swordless and stuck in a world full of enemies, Link encounters an old man who will become his first ally. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this, the old man states as he hands Link his first sword. The line itself has leapt from obscure popularity amongst gamers to being referenced in everyday pop culture. In fact, it's difficult to think of the Legend of Zelda franchise without this particular scene. However, during the development of the game, Link actually started with the sword in his inventory. Nintendo nearly left the game this way, but a last-minute change during the late stages of development dropped the sword from Link's inventory. Instead, they opted to have Link enter a cave and be given a sword by a strange old man. So what prompted this nearly last-minute change? Simply put, Miyamoto felt as though the game wasn't confusing enough and wanted to send Link out into a world without a weapon. Essentially, he felt as though a confusing game would create dialogue between gamers and foster a community around the game itself. Fortunately, his plan worked out, and it went on to become one of the most popular games of all time. Cryptic Message. If Nintendo's endgame was to release a title confusing enough to prompt player discussions around it, they certainly succeeded. Not only did the old man in the cave give Link a much-needed weapon in order to survive, but his doppelgangers ran rampant throughout the series. In some instances, the old men assist Link throughout his journey by giving him helpful tips or doling out items which might be useful. Then there are other times when the old men become a hindrance to Link, even going so far as mugging him when the opportunity arises. Most of the old men's assistance comes in the form of cryptic messages, some of which were easy to decipher. One message in particular took about 25 years for anyone to crack, however. The tip was, 10th enemy has the bomb. Players were stumped as they tried various methods to figure out this hint. They tried counting enemies, and the 10th one did not give them a bomb. Eventually, the hint became clear. If Link kills 9 enemies without getting hit, and then kills the 10th enemy with a bomb, he gets a reward. Another bomb. How useful. Many fans of the franchise feel as though a lot of the American hints in the game are nonsensical due to being lost in translation. If anything, at least Link gets his bomb back. Tingle. Fans of the Legend of Zelda franchise are more than familiar with the lovable elven character Tingle. Since his first appearance in Majora's Mask, he's been a relatively polarizing addition to the franchise. Most gamers view him as an irritation which they must deal with in order to complete any Zelda game since Majora's Mask. In fact, Tingle is so unpopular in some circles that IGN featured an article entitled "Die Tingle, Die, Die." Their hatred of Tingle led them to reconsider their overall rating of The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker due to his selfish behavior. In Wind Waker, Tingle has a series of fetch quests he sends Link on, which, according to some gamers, become tedious and a bit annoying. With so much hatred for Tingle, it should surprise some fans that he's one of the most popular characters in the franchise. He's appeared in numerous titles, including Super Smash Bros. Melee since his first appearance. Of course, it's no surprise that the little green character is insanely popular in Japan. How popular exactly? He holds enough importance in Japan that he has his very own spin-off series with 4 games in total so far. Due to the extreme hate Tingle gets from outside of Japan, Kensuke Tanabe has made it his personal mission to make the character beloved worldwide. Voice commands. Gaming companies would like gamers to believe that voice commands and voice recognition are a relatively new technology being included in systems like the Nintendo 3DS and Microsoft Kinect. While it may not have been appropriately utilized to its full potential prior to the 3DS and Kinect, it was certainly available on some systems dating back a few decades. In 1986, the Famicom controller was actually outfitted with a small microphone to use in conjunction with games. Nintendo, however, didn't put the microphone to much use, and it seems as though this technology was only usable on a handful of games for the Famicom system. It wasn't a feature the company included on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and this created a few issues, especially when it came to The Legend of Zelda. When it came to the enemy Pole's voice, Famicom users could utilize the microphone to destroy him. With the release of the Nintendo, there was no microphone available for users. However, the manual which came with the game stated that Pole's voice hated noise. Confused players would then attempt to use the whistle against them, completely unaware that the advice given in the manual was in regard to the microphone-outfitted Famicom system. In the American version of the game, players would have to take out Pole's voice with arrows instead. Symbolism. It may come as a surprise to some Nintendo fans, but Nintendo of America originally had a ban on using any religious imagery in games. Actually, it appears as though Nintendo of America is still somewhat iffy when it comes to religious imagery in games. For instance, prior to 2017, the company did not want to include the Binding of Isaac on their consoles due to the imagery included in the game. However, it appears to be available on the Nintendo Switch for now. Nintendo of America's stance on religious imagery in games was allegedly due to the fact that they did not want to offend anyone. Fair enough, as most large corporations try to straddle the line between profit and popularity amongst fans. Throughout the years, it appears as though Nintendo of America tends to flip-flop on this particular issue. One moment there's a ban, yet some religious imagery is allowed to slip through. Unfortunately, this religious ban led to some interesting choices when it came to the Legend of Zelda franchise. Most notably, in the Japanese version of the game, the Book of Magic was called the Holy Book. The Triforce itself obviously leans heavily on the Trinity, which is often a religious connotation. Then, of course, there are abundant crosses throughout the Legend of Zelda franchise, including the one originally on Link's shield. Soundtrack. The Legend of Zelda theme, also known as the Overworld theme, is one of the most recognizable songs from a video game ever, aside from the legendary Super Mario Bros. Theme song. It's difficult to think of the Legend of Zelda franchise without this iconic song. However, the Japanese version of this song is slightly better and more well-rounded than the American version. Nevertheless, the Overworld theme is a huge part of popular culture across the world. Luckily, the Overworld theme is the song Nintendo decided to go with when they released the game. Could they have chosen anything else? Well, they almost did. In fact, the company originally wanted to use Ravel's Bolero as the main theme for The Legend of Zelda. Fortunately for fans, Nintendo realized it was still covered under copyright law, so they were forced to consider other options. For a moment, they considered using stock music for the main tracks in The Legend of Zelda. As fans already know, this is not the final direction Nintendo took the soundtrack in. Composer Koji Kondo, the same composer who created the iconic Super Mario Bros. Theme, was tasked with creating the original 8-bit theme for The Legend of Zelda. Considering the popularity of these two songs, Nintendo definitely made the right choice. The Legend. Fans of the Legend of Zelda franchise are very aware of the shortcomings when it comes to names. First, the name itself is somewhat long. The Legend of Zelda may have worked well for the first title in the series. However, subsequent titles end up tacking on more and more words with each release, which creates long and involved titles which non-players may find confusing. The Legend of Zelda also creates other issues, especially for people who may not have played any of the games in the series. Oftentimes, people become confused regarding which character in the franchise is Link and which is Zelda. The title itself leads people to believe that Princess Zelda is the main playable character throughout the franchise instead of Link. In Japan, the game itself had a different name entirely. While some fans can't conceive of the series being called anything other than The Legend of Zelda, the name in Japan actually makes a lot more sense and does away with the character name confusion. While the Hyrule Fantasy is a sufficient name for the Legend of Zelda series, considering that Link does most of the work, it's not held up over time. Instead, Japan eventually followed suit and retitled their version of the game to match America's. Prototype. The Legend of Zelda title has sold over 6.5 million copies worldwide. At the time of its release, the game itself was innovative and paved the way for similar titles which would inevitably follow it. In retrospect, the game itself holds its own even though the 8-bit technology may not. Even so, fans can easily overlook this in favor of sheer nostalgia. Although the original game is several decades old, as of 2017 it still continues to break records. In 2012, a prototype cartridge of the original Legend of Zelda game sold for over $55,000. This sale broke the previous record of Stadium Events, an easily forgettable game which sold on eBay for $42,000. The original asking price for the prototype cartridge was $150,000, but the seller was open to offers. In the end, they wanted the piece of gaming history to go to a buyer that would truly appreciate the legacy of The Legend of Zelda. While video game memorabilia is typically in high demand, the fact that the original Legend of Zelda prototype cartridge sold for over $55,000 only goes to show the importance of the game itself. While the technology may be outdated and the storyline may have been copied several times over, The Legend of Zelda is still a major importance in the video game industry. So, which title in the Legend of Zelda franchise is your favorite? Did we miss any facts about the franchise? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to click the subscribe button so you can watch even more videos from our playlist. Thanks for watching!